Welcome back to Outside Views. Today we're diving into a pressing economic issue that could significantly impact the United Kingdom's economic future. The looming US tariffs on imported cars and their potentially massive repercussions on the UK economy. As always, full transparency, I am not British, and personally I believe Brexit was a terrible mistake and a lot of things deal with that. And today's topic highlights yet another unintended consequence of that decision, a situation that puts the UK's economic stability at risk due to external political decisions beyond its controls, and standing alone. The United States recently announced plans to impose 25% tariffs on imported cars starting from April 3rd. And this decision directly threatens the UK automotive sector, often referred to by industry insiders as the engine room of Britain's international trade. To truly grasp the severity of the situation, let's first understand the pivotal role the automotive industry plays in Britain's economy. In 2024 alone, nearly 780,000 vehicles were produced in Britain. Impressively, about 80% of these vehicles were exported, primarily to key markets such as the European Union, the United States, and China. Among those critical markets, the US alone accounted for nearly 17% of these exports, underscoring just how vital this market is for British automotive manufacturers. And now, the UK's automotive giants, companies like Jaguar Land Rover, BMW-owned Mini and Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Aston Martin, Nissan, Toyota, and McLaren, face an unprecedented, daunting economic challenge. And let's delve deeper into why these tariffs pose such a severe threat. At face value, a 25% tariff might seem manageable, but it represents a profound disruption, especially to luxury car manufacturers. These high-end manufacturers, such as Bentley and Aston Martin, rely significantly on the affluent US market. For instance, Aston Martin generated roughly one-third of its £1.6 billion revenue from the US alone last year, while Bentley exported around 30% of its vehicles to America in 2024. And facing the imposition of a 25% tariff, companies have limited options. They either absorb the substantial costs, severely cutting into their own profitability, or pass this increased expense onto consumers, risking a significant loss of competitive advantage in an already fiercely contested luxury automotive market. Indeed, Bentley's CFO Jan-Hendrik Lafrens has explicitly stated that these additional costs will inevitably be passed on to consumers, potentially dampening sales volumes considerably. But the consequences extend far beyond the luxury sector. The broader economic repercussions could be severe. According to official forecasts from the UK government, these US-imposed tariffs could reduce Britain's economic growth by up to 1%. And this seemingly modest figure is deceptively impactful. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves currently maintains only £9.9 billion in fiscal headroom, and a 1% decline in growth could completely eradicate this crucial financial buffer. And consequently, the UK government would face substantially reduced capacity to implement vital public spendings, investments, or to respond effectively to unforeseen economic emergencies. And this tariff issue doesn't merely affect luxury car manufacturers. Even Japanese giants like Nissan and Toyota, which predominantly produce vehicles destined for the European market from their UK plants, are vulnerable. While they might not directly export large volumes to the US, the indirect effects through disrupted supply chains, increased operational costs, and reduced economic confidence could severely impact their UK operations. The UK government is urgently trying to negotiate exemptions or delays for these tariffs. Recently, Industry Minister Sarah Jones held discussions with automotive industry leaders, but according to insiders, the government mainly listened without offering clear solutions or decisive action. Britain's notably subdued response contrasts sharply with the positions taken by other affected countries. Germany has vowed not to capitulate, and France and Canada have openly promised retaliatory measures like the EU. And in a dramatic statement, Canada's Prime Minister and former Bank of England Governor Marc declared that Canada's long-standing relations with the US is over. In contrast, the UK continues to pursue a cautious, pragmatic approach, emphasizing the importance of its special relationship with the US. Treasury Minister Darren Jones has explicitly stated that the UK's desire to avoid a full-blown trade war, describing the issue as complicated with no straightforward solutions. Critics, however, argue that this careful approach risks making Britain appear weak, potentially inviting further aggressive trade measures in the future. Moreover, it underscores the diminished influence Britain now holds in international trade negotiations following Brexit. Brexit advocates promised the British public bold and independent trade deals, particularly with major global economies like the US. Instead, we are witnessing increasing isolation and vulnerability, where Britain struggles to influence or counter unilateral decisions by larger economies. Previously, as part of the EU bloc, the UK enjoyed substantial negotiating leverage. And post-Brexit, Britain stands significantly isolated. Its economic and political influence, though notable, pales compared to that of the EU or the US. And the outcome is clear: reduced bargaining power, fewer concessions, and increased vulnerability to external economic threats. The tariff crisis starkly highlights a fundamental flaw in Brexit's strategic logic. Rather than gaining greater control and independence, the UK now finds itself at the mercy of unpredictable international political decisions. Its automotive industry, a flagship economic sector, is now significantly exposed to global risk. And while some experts hold on to hope for a last-minute compromise, industry insiders privately acknowledge that the window for meaningful negotiation is quickly narrowing, if not already shut. As the critical April 3rd deadline approaches, the UK's automotive sector must brace for the worst-case scenario. Companies urgently seek government intervention and support to mitigate severe economic damages. Yet, even substantial government assistance might not suffice to maintain long-term competitiveness. The UK's government handling of this crisis will profoundly shape perceptions of Britain's reliability as a global economic partner. International investors, automotive manufacturers, and supply chain stakeholders are closely observing developments. A perceived failure by Britain to defend its economic interests effectively could result in a significant erosion of global investor confidence. Brexit was sold to the British people as a path toward greater sovereignty and prosperity. However, today Britain navigates international trade from a position of markedly diminished strength. And far from achieving the global Britain vision promised by Brexit supporters, the current crisis starkly reveals significant vulnerabilities and diminished international negotiating power. Ultimately, this tariff dispute represents much more than just a trade disagreement. It symbolizes Britain's broader struggle in the post-Brexit landscape. It raises critical questions regarding global influence, economic stability, and the very real cost of political and economic isolation. Furthermore, this crisis poses deeper questions about future international trade alliances. If the US, historically Britain's strongest ally, can implement such punitive economic measures with minimal resistance, what does this indicate about the future robustness of UK's international relations and trade strategies? Which other industries might face similar risks? How can Britain effectively reposition itself globally to manage and mitigate such economic threats moving forward? These challenging questions demand serious consideration. The UK's responses will undoubtedly shape its economic and political trajectory for decades. And that concludes today's analysis, and I would love to hear your perspective. How should Britain respond to these tariffs? Is its current cautious approach appropriate, or should the government adopt a more assertive stance? So please share your views in the comments below. And if this little discussion provided value, remember to like the video and subscribe to Outside Views for more insightful analysis on global politics and economics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.